published an environmental assessment that many of you have probably downloaded or have had a chance to review. We did that at the end of February, and the comment period on that environmental assessment ends on March 26th. And the point of this meeting is to collect additional comments regarding the environmental assessment. The format tonight will be an open house format, like the previous meeting. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But before that, last meeting there was some confusion about who's who. So I wanted to go through and just do introductions. My name is John Weil, and I'm the Roads and Parks Director for Jackson County, responsible for the roads and parks in the area. And I was assigned this project by the Board of Commissioners back in July to oversee. We have Megan Hilgard. Wave and say hi. Megan's the Habitat Restoration Specialist for the National Marine Fisheries Service, for the organization NIMS. And it's through NIMS and through NOAA how this project was funded to Jackson County. Scott Wright. Scott Wright is a principal with River Design Group out of Corvallis, and Scott is the overall project manager for this project. He's been leading all the environmental studies, the permitting, and everything else, helping Slate Construction with that process. Darren Funk. Darren is the project manager for Slate Construction. The county has a contract with Slate to complete all the environmental work, and then if the board chooses to take the dam out, to ultimately oversee and complete that work, and Darren will be leading that process. And at the risk of upsetting somebody, Darren and Scott are both Beavers, so I like them. Sorry, Duck fans. Craig Harper. Craig works for Rogue Valley Council of Governments, and he's the Natural Resource Coordinator, and Jackson County has contracted with RV Cog to help us with the public process on this project. That's why they're collecting all the comments and cataloging all those and assisting us with that. James Gregory. James is an environmental planner with HDR, the consulting firm that has done the bulk of the work for the environmental process, permitting and everything else. James was the lead specialist completing the environmental assessment on this project. Steve Mason. Where's Steve at? Steve's a local guy, lives in Ashland. I think it's Ashland. Where do you live? Well, close enough. He also works with HDR, and Steve is a senior biologist who has done much of the footwork down here in the valley and been really instrumental in getting us to where we're at. And Craig Tuss. Craig is a retired U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and he's assisting with this project. Eric Dittmer. Eric's a professor emeritus at Southern Oregon University. And Ken Pippin. Ken is the branch chief for the National Marine Fisheries Service as well, out of Roseburg, right, Ken? Right. The reason I introduce all these folks is because in the open house format, we'll be breaking up into stations, and we'll be talking to folks. We wanted to make sure it's clear on who you're talking to and what position they hold and what the role they have played in the project is. So I want to run through what we're going to do is I'm going to run through a short little presentation, and then when that's done, I'm going to have Scott Wright go through quite a few of the details of things that we have found in the environmental assessment process. In the previous two meetings, there was lots of questions regarding different aspects of the project and different impacts. Frequently the answer was, well, we're going to study that. Well, the bottom line, a lot of these things we studied it. And Scott has some answers for many of those items, and he's going to share that with you tonight. So, first of all, I wanted to just run through a few things. That'll work a lot better. Thank you. Prior till today, or prior to the EA period starting at the end of February, we received 337 comments in the form of emails, written comments, letters, and the such that were sent in to the Rogue Valley Council of Government that were collected and cataloged. Since the EA is open on February 25th, we received 302 comments. And the primary themes that we have received comments are private property impacts. That's a very popular one. Impacts to wells, water intakes, and other impacts to people living either below or above the dam that could be impacted to their private property. Recreation and fisheries is a very common one. And I noted on there both pro and con. There's been a ton of comments about that this is a good thing recreationally. There's comments that this is a bad thing recreationally. A lot of comments that it's a positive thing for the fish. A lot of things about this is a negative thing for the fish. So those two are very, very common themes in the comments that were sent in. We received a lot of comments that just basically said we're in favor of dam removal, and supported letters and those sorts of things that said take the dam out. There's a lot of those sorts of comments. Especially early on in the project, a common theme that we heard about and were asked questions about was power generation. We're going to take questions at the individual stations.
I think it's a question that is relative to the information you're presently providing.
I'm going to keep going, and we can address that later.
Question for you though: did you catalog whether the people who were making these comments were actually residents, or were they from outside the area?
I'm going to get to that point in the presentation. So power generation was a common theme. People asking questions about the status of the power generation. Can the dam generate power? Is it economically feasible? Suggesting that we continue to look at that, and Scott's going to present some additional information on that. A lot of folks concerned about wildlife habitat. A very common theme was what happens to the large area behind the dam and the wildlife that are present there if the dam is in fact taken out. And then obviously a couple of comments that would be directly related to any dam removal is what happens to the sediment behind the dam, where does it go, how is it transported, where does it end up, and then the water quality issues that would be associated by taking the dam out. When you looked at the environmental assessment, you'll notice that Jackson County is not on the cover, and that NOAA is the national organization, the federal organization that's overseeing this project and that has funded this project. The reason for that is they are the lead agency, and through this process, Jackson County has to work with NIMS and with NOAA to collect and to conduct the environmental assessment in a manner that meets all federal standards, expectations, and everything else. So NIMS is the lead agency. When the document is issued, they are the ones that sign it. When a final document is issued, they are the ones that sign it. They are ultimately responsible for whatever's in there and whatever is not in there. So NIMS is the lead agency there. I got several comments about, I thought the county did this study. The county's leading the project, but it is a federal process that NIMS is leading. A lot of folks ask questions and are not clear on what the purpose of an environmental assessment is. Through the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA is what is commonly referred to, you have EISs, environmental impact statements, environmental assessments. And the purpose of that environmental assessment, environmental impact statement is really about disclosure and public involvement. The EIS or EA process doesn't force you or suggest that you have to pick the least impactful alternative or the greatest. All it is about basically documenting what the impacts of a proposed action are, sharing that with the public, and getting feedback from them. It's basically, before NEPA was in place, federal agencies, and state agencies and counties and everybody else could take actions that had a very heavy impact upon the environment. And really what NEPA did is it said you can't do that until you tell the public what you're doing, what the impacts are, and ask them to participate in the process and receive feedback from them. And so that's basically what NEPA does. What NEPA is not, it's not a vote. And so the question was asked about, are we cataloging where these comments come from? It's not a vote. The Board of Commissioners, which will ultimately make a decision on this as far as whether to move forward or not, they can select an alternative that not one person supports. They can select an alternative that everybody supports. It's simply not a vote, and the majority doesn't win in this process. The Board of Commissioners will look at all the impacts, study the three alternatives that were looked at, and they'll make a decision on what they think is best for Jackson County. So the environmental assessment has studied the social, economic, and environmental impact of the three alternatives. And the three alternatives are a no-action alternative. And a no-action alternative is required anytime you do a study such as this in an environmental assessment. You always look at not doing anything. So that's one of the alternatives that was studied in the EA. We also studied dam removal and what are the environmental, social, economic, and other impacts that would occur if you take that dam out. And so a lot of the document is associated with those impacts and catalogs and delineates what those impacts would be if you remove the dam